For many men, sex isn't just about pleasure, it's about feeling wanted, confident, and emotionally connected. It's their way of expressing love, seeking reassurance, and building intimacy. When understood deeply, sex becomes more than physical. It becomes emotional safety. Ignoring this truth creates distance. Honoring it builds trust, passion, and real connection. Sex is more than just a physical act for men. It's a deeply emotional and psychological experience that goes far beyond biology. While society often portrays men as simple beings driven primarily by sexual urges, the truth is much more nuanced. Yes, testosterone plays a role in creating desire, but that doesn't tell the full story. For many men, sex is one of the rare moments where they feel truly seen, valued, and accepted. It becomes a gateway not only to pleasure, but to intimacy, validation, and even healing. We live in a world where men are often discouraged from expressing vulnerability. They're taught to be strong, stoic, and self-sufficient, and as a result, many struggle to articulate their emotional needs. Over time, this emotional suppression becomes normal, and instead of expressing what they feel with words, many men find themselves expressing it through touch. Sex becomes a language, one they're allowed to speak, one that doesn't make them feel weak, one that still gives them access to connection without breaking the rules of masculinity they've learned. For a man in a committed relationship, sex is often one of the few spaces where he feels completely accepted. It's a moment when he doesn't have to perform or prove himself in any other way. If the woman he loves desires him, that desire says more to him than any compliment ever could. It says, "I want you, you matter, you're enough." That kind of validation can be profoundly grounding, especially for a man who might be silently battling insecurity, self-doubt, or emotional stress. This is also why rejection in the bedroom can sting so deeply. When a man reaches out for intimacy and is met with disinterest or indifference, it can feel personal, even if it isn't meant that way. It's not just a moment of physical rejection. It's often interpreted as emotional disconnection. Of course, women experience emotional needs around sex too, but many women have outlets for emotional expression outside of physical intimacy. For men, sex can be one of the few doors left open to that world. Men often feel most emotionally safe when there is a sense of closeness in the relationship, and for them, that closeness often begins with physical connection. Where many women seek emotional intimacy first and let physical closeness follow, some men do the opposite. They feel emotionally close because they are physically connected, and when that connection is missing for too long, the emotional distance starts to grow. Not because they don't care, but because they start to feel shut out from the one space where they felt truly bonded. Sex can also be a way for men to cope. After a long day, after disappointment, or when they feel out of control in other parts of their life, some men turn to sex not just for release, but for reassurance. It's a way to feel powerful, affirmed, grounded. It reminds them that despite the chaos outside, they are still wanted, still significant. This doesn't mean sex is used as a distraction from problems. In many cases, it's an attempt to reconnect with something stabilizing and familiar. There's also the role of identity. A man's self-image is often closely tied to his ability to provide, perform, and protect. When he feels desired sexually, it reinforces his belief that he is still succeeding in some of these roles. It affirms that he's still attractive, still capable, still worthy. That feeling can be like fuel to his confidence. When it's missing, he may not always be able to explain what feels off, but he can feel it deeply, as a kind of low-grade emotional hunger that eventually creates distance between him and his partner. Of course, sex alone doesn't make a relationship healthy or lasting, but for many men, it is an indicator. When the physical connection is alive, it often signals that the emotional connection is too. When sex disappears, many men take that as a sign that something bigger is going wrong, even if they can't articulate it clearly. They may not always say what they feel. They may not know how to say it, but they feel it. Understanding that sex is not just physical for men, but emotional and psychological, changes the conversation. It allows women to see past the stereotype of men as purely physical beings and recognize the deeper need for connection that lives behind the act. It opens the door for compassion, for better communication, and for more honest relationships, ones where both partners feel safe, wanted, and emotionally nourished. For many men, sex is not just about the physical act. It's about being desired. It's about feeling wanted in a way that cuts deeper than compliments or kind gestures. While men are often portrayed as the ones who do the chasing, the truth is that being pursued, being wanted, matters profoundly to them too. It feeds a part of their identity that rarely gets the attention it deserves. Men may not always say it out loud, but when they are desired sexually, it gives them a sense of significance and validation that is difficult to replicate elsewhere. In day-to-day life, men are frequently expected to be the initiators, the providers, the protectors. They're told to be strong, dependable, and focused. While these roles can give a sense of pride, they don't always leave room for emotional fulfillment. Many men move through life feeling like their value is measured by their ability to show up for others, solve problems, and keep it all together. But when a woman shows that she desires him, not just appreciates him, not just respects him, but wants him, it shifts everything. It reminds him that he's not just useful, but attractive, not just strong, but alluring. That feeling of being desired sexually goes right to the heart of a man's self-esteem. When his partner initiates sex or expresses genuine attraction, it tells him that he's still exciting, still appealing, still enough. It's a moment where he doesn't have to prove anything through words or achievements. His very presence is enough. That's powerful because so much of male self-worth is often tied to performance, whether at work, in relationships, or in life in general. But in that intimate moment, performance gives way to presence. He's wanted as he is. This is why the absence of sexual desire in a relationship can slowly chip away at a man's confidence. If the woman he loves no longer shows interest, he might begin to question himself. He might not talk about it openly. He might not even fully understand what he's feeling, but that silence doesn't mean it isn't affecting him. It often creates a quiet emotional distance, a feeling of being invisible in the one place he most longs to be seen. He may begin to feel like a roommate rather than a lover, like someone who's there out of obligation rather than desire, and that shift can be devastating. When a man feels desired, he feels emotionally safe. He's more likely to open up, to soften, to show parts of himself that he usually keeps guarded. Sexual attraction is one of the few areas in life where many men feel they can be vulnerable without judgment. It's a rare space where their emotional walls come down, not because they're being asked to be emotional, but because they feel accepted on a primal level. That acceptance makes it easier for them to trust, to share, and to connect beyond the physical. Sometimes, women misread a man's desire for sex as a shallow or repetitive need. They might think, "Why does he always want it?" Or, "Is that all he thinks about?" But the question often isn't about the frequency of sex. It's about the feeling that sex provides. It's not just about touch. It's about being chosen, desired, picked again and again by the person he cares most about. In a world that constantly judges men based on what they produce, what they earn, and how they perform, being desired sexually offers something rare. It offers unconditional approval. There's also a difference between sex that's given and sex that's offered. When a man feels that his partner is going along with sex out of duty or routine rather than genuine desire, it can feel hollow. He may not say anything, but he feels the emotional gap. It's not just the act itself that matters, it's the energy behind it. Is she excited to be with him? Does she find him attractive? Is she responding to him, not just to the moment? These are the unspoken questions that live under the surface. And when the answers are yes, the intimacy becomes transformational. When the answers are no, the connection starts to erode. That's why compliments, flirtation, and initiation from a partner can have such a powerful impact on a man. It's not about ego stroking, it's about reassurance. A spontaneous touch, a lingering kiss, a a playful tease. These moments are affirmations. They say, "I still see you. I still want you. You still move me." And those signals don't just stay in the bedroom. They carry over into how he shows up in the relationship, how secure he feels, how motivated he is to love and give and protect. At his core, a man doesn't just want sex, he wants to be desired. He wants to know that the person he loves still sees him with passion and interest. That desire becomes the fuel for deeper connection, not just physically, but emotionally. It's what keeps the spark alive, what turns routine into romance, and what makes a relationship feel alive rather than just maintained. Sex can be one of the rare places where men feel safe enough to let their guard down. In a world that constantly tells them to be strong, composed, and in control, men often grow up with the message that vulnerability is weakness. That message doesn't just come from society, it's reinforced through culture, relationships, and sometimes even within themselves. As a result, many men go through life carrying silent emotional burdens, not because they don't feel deeply, but because they don't always feel permitted to express what they feel. And yet, in the space of sexual intimacy, some of that pressure can melt away. It becomes one of the few moments when they feel allowed to be soft, open, and emotionally present. For a man, physical closeness can serve as a gateway to emotional safety. The act of sex is often less about dominance or release, and more about connection. When he's with someone he trusts, someone who sees him beyond the surface, sex becomes a sanctuary. It's the one time where he isn't performing for the world, isn't trying to fix anything, and isn't being judged. It's in those moments, under the weight of passion and vulnerability, that he might feel free enough to show parts of himself that he's kept hidden. Fears, insecurities, even unspoken hopes. These are the pieces of his emotional world that don't always come out in conversations, but they often rise quietly through touch. Many men are not conditioned to be emotionally articulate. They're not always taught how to name what they're feeling, and even when they do, they sometimes feel uncomfortable saying it out loud. So instead of sitting down to talk through pain or doubt, they turn to what feels safer, intimacy. It's not that they're avoiding emotions, it's that they're expressing them differently. Through physical connection, they are often saying, "I need you, I trust you, I want to feel close to you," even if those words never leave their mouth. For many women, emotional intimacy comes before physical intimacy. But for many men, physical intimacy is how they arrive at emotional closeness. This is why a sexually connected relationship often brings out the softer, more emotionally expressive side of a man. When he feels desired and accepted in bed, he becomes more secure in the relationship as a whole. That sense of security is what allows him to be more emotionally generous, more communicative, and more affectionate. It's not that sex magically changes him, it's that it creates a space where he no longer feels the need to protect himself so fiercely. When a man feels truly safe in intimacy, he doesn't just show up physically, he starts to show up emotionally too. It's important to understand that vulnerability is terrifying for many men. It exposes them to the risk of judgment, rejection, and shame. They may have had past experiences where opening up was met with criticism or indifference, and those wounds linger. But during sex, when there is mutual respect, trust, and presence, those fears can start to ease. The emotional walls that are so carefully built during the day often soften at night. In those quiet, unguarded moments after intimacy, many men find the courage to say things they've been holding back, how much they care, what scares them, what they want for the future. And often, those words only come after they've felt that physical reassurance. This is also why emotional disconnection in a relationship can lead to sexual disinterest or dysfunction. When a man doesn't feel emotionally safe, it becomes harder for him to access the vulnerability required for true intimacy. He might still desire sex, but something feels blocked, and when that physical connection starts to fade, so too does the emotional openness that it used to unlock. It's a cycle that works both ways. Emotional distance affects physical closeness, and physical distance can deepen emotional gaps. Sex isn't a cure for emotional disconnection, but in a healthy relationship, it can be a powerful tool for emotional healing. It helps a man feel like he's not alone in the world. It reminds him that he's still loved, still accepted, and still connected. It tells him that he doesn't have to carry everything by himself. And that feeling that someone sees him, wants him, and accepts him even in his most vulnerable state is often more powerful than anything he could put into words. It makes him feel safe, not just in the moment, but in the relationship. And that kind of safety changes everything. Testosterone is often seen as the primary driver of male sexual desire, and biologically, that's true to an extent. It fuels libido, triggers arousal, and plays a role in how often a man thinks about or initiates sex. But if we stop the conversation there, we miss the deeper truth. While testosterone may create the drive, it's emotion that gives sex its meaning. Without emotional connection, sex can feel empty, even for men, and yet this nuance is so rarely acknowledged. The stereotype says men want sex just because their hormones push them toward it. But for many men, especially in meaningful relationships, the need goes far beyond biology. When a man enters a relationship he truly values, the way he experiences sex changes. It's no longer just about satisfying a physical urge. It becomes about closeness, connection, and affirmation. It's not just about the act. It's about what the act represents. Sex becomes a way to feel loved, to give love, and to confirm that he's emotionally secure with his partner. It becomes a reflection of how things are going between them, a silent indicator of trust, acceptance, and intimacy. That's why men often react so strongly to changes in the sexual dynamic of a relationship. If sex becomes less frequent, less passionate, or more routine, he might not just feel rejected physically, he might feel emotionally disconnected, not because he's needy or selfish, but because that physical bond was his way of feeling emotionally plugged in. He may not know how to articulate it, but he senses the shift, and it can shake his confidence. He may question whether his partner still desires him, still values the relationship, or still sees him the same way. It's not testosterone asking those questions, it's emotion. In truth, a purely physical experience doesn't fulfill most men for long. Even in casual encounters, what often lingers afterward isn't the satisfaction, it's the lack of deeper connection. That post-intimacy void speaks to something deeper. It's a reminder that while sex can satisfy a momentary craving, it doesn't nourish the heart unless there's meaning behind it. And that meaning comes from emotional presence, mutual care, and the feeling that he matters beyond what he provides or performs. When a man loves deeply, sex becomes a way to express what he struggles to say. It becomes a physical language for emotions he may not have been taught to speak out loud. Through touch, eye contact, and closeness, he communicates things like, "I trust you, I need you, you matter to me, and I'm still here." These aren't just romantic gestures. They are acts of emotional expression, and while testosterone may bring him to the door of desire, it's his heart that brings depth to the experience. This is also why sex in long-term relationships can become more meaningful over time. As emotional bonds strengthen, so does the intimacy in physical connection. It becomes layered with history, shared experiences, trust, and emotional safety. The chemistry may evolve, but the depth intensifies. It's no longer just about satisfaction, it's about shared vulnerability. That kind of connection can't be replicated with someone new because it's not just driven by hormones, it's rooted in emotional intimacy. There are also times when a man may want sex not because he's consumed by desire, but because he's seeking comfort. After a stressful day, a disappointment, or emotional turmoil, the desire for intimacy may rise, not as an escape, but as a way to feel grounded again. In those moments, it's not testosterone that's talking, it's a need for reassurance. He's not looking for stimulation, he's looking for connection. He wants to be reminded that despite the chaos, he's still loved, still wanted, and still safe. In relationships where men feel emotionally neglected or unseen, their desire for sex may persist. but it starts to lose meaning. It becomes more about filling a void than building a connection. And that shift can be confusing. They may still pursue sex, but afterward feel unsatisfied, even lonely, because it wasn't the act they were missing, it was the emotional closeness that used to come with it. And when that's gone, even the most physically intense moments can feel empty. Testosterone may create the urge. It may spark the thought, initiate the moment, or fuel the passion. But what makes sex meaningful, what gives it depth, emotional resonance, and lasting satisfaction isn't chemical. It's human. It's the emotions behind the act, the connection between two people, and the mutual vulnerability that turns sex from a moment into a memory, from an instinct into intimacy. That's where fulfillment lives, not in the drive, but in the meaning we give to it. Sex plays a powerful role in a man's sense of confidence. It goes far beyond the physical realm and touches something much deeper: his identity, his worth, his ability to feel significant in a relationship. While it's easy to dismiss male sexual desire as a purely physical or instinctual need, the emotional layers behind it are often overlooked. For many men, sex isn't just about pleasure. It's about feeling competent, desirable, and connected. When those feelings are affirmed through intimacy, it directly feeds into how confident he feels, not just in the bedroom, but in other areas of life as well. A man who feels desired and appreciated by his partner walks differently. He carries himself with more ease, more certainty, more warmth. There's a noticeable difference in his energy. That's because being wanted sexually by the person he loves validates something inside him that can't be filled by success at work, physical achievements, or even social approval. Sexual connection is deeply tied to how he sees himself as a man. When that connection is healthy and mutual, it's like fuel for his sense of self. When it's missing, he may feel like something is off, but he won't always know how to put it into words. This link between sex and confidence starts early. Boys often grow up in environments where strength, performance, and dominance are rewarded, and emotional vulnerability is sidelined. So by the time they're men, they've learned that being good enough means being strong, capable, and appealing, especially to women. Sexual success becomes a form of validation. It says you're still wanted, you're still attractive, you still have it. In a relationship, when a man feels that his partner desires him, that message is reinforced. It affirms his masculinity, not in a shallow way, but in a deeply emotional one. When sex becomes rare, disconnected, or one-sided, it can chip away at that confidence. A man may begin to wonder if he's doing something wrong, if he's no longer attractive, or if something in the relationship is fading. Even if his partner's reasons have nothing to do with him, stress, exhaustion, emotional overwhelm, he may internalize the absence of intimacy as a reflection of his worth. This isn't about ego, it's about connection. Sex tells him that he's still close, still accepted, still enough. When that disappears, the silence often speaks louder than words. Some men also experience this through performance anxiety. The pressure to be good in bed is real, and when they feel they're not meeting expectations, it can lead to a crisis of confidence. A single moment of perceived failure can spiral into a bigger story they tell themselves about inadequacy, and when those insecurities are left unspoken, they can lead to avoidance, withdrawal, or emotional distance. That's why compassion and communication are so important in intimate moments. Reassurance goes a long way, not just physically, but emotionally. It's also worth noting that confidence gained through sex isn't just about being desired. It's also about being trusted, being safe to express, and being accepted for who he really is. When a man feels emotionally connected during sex, when he sees that his partner is engaged, responsive, and present, it gives him the courage to open up more in other parts of the relationship. That emotional safety reinforces his confidence in the relationship itself. It becomes a two-way mirror. He feels secure, so he gives more. And the more he gives, the deeper the connection grows. On the flip side, when sex is used as a tool for control, punishment, or manipulation, it can erode a man's confidence rapidly. He may begin to see himself as unwanted or not enough, even if his partner never intended that message. The emotional impact of consistent sexual rejection, especially without explanation or reassurance, can create long-term damage to his self-esteem. He may become less expressive, less affectionate, and more guarded, not because he doesn't care, but because he's afraid of further rejection. In a healthy relationship, sex becomes a place of restoration for a man's confidence. It's where he's reminded that he matters, not just for what he does or provides, but for who he is. It grounds him in the relationship and gives him the kind of emotional strength that shows up in other areas of life. He becomes more patient, more attentive, more present because he feels safe, connected, and seen. And that feeling doesn't come from physical pleasure alone. It comes from emotional intimacy built through trust, acceptance, and genuine desire. For many men, sex is one of the most powerful and honest ways to communicate love. It goes beyond the physical mechanics of intimacy and touches on something much more emotional and meaningful. While women are often encouraged and socialized to express love through words, gestures, and affection, many men are taught the opposite. They're often told to be strong, stoic, and in control. Vulnerability is something many men don't feel comfortable with, not because they don't feel, but because they've never been given the language or space to express what they feel. So instead of saying "I love you" with words, some men say it through touch. Sex becomes a bridge between the physical and emotional worlds. It's how some men open up emotionally without needing to expose themselves verbally. During moments of intimacy, walls come down. In those quiet, unspoken exchanges, through a kiss, a gentle touch, or deep eye contact, a man may be expressing something he doesn't know how to say. "You mean everything to me. I choose you. I feel safe with you." It's not just desire, it's connection. And for men who struggle to access their emotional side in everyday conversations, sex becomes a form of love language. It's not just something they want, it's something they give as a way to show what's in their heart. This form of communication can often be misunderstood. A partner may interpret his desire for sex as purely physical or assume that it lacks emotional depth. But in many cases, his need for intimacy is rooted in wanting to feel close, to share something sacred, to affirm his bond with the person he loves. It's not about escape or lust, it's about union. He's not just seeking pleasure, he's reaching out for connection. And when his partner reciprocates with presence, enthusiasm, and affection, it speaks volumes to him. It tells him that the love is mutual, that the bond is alive, and that he's accepted in his most vulnerable state. In long-term relationships, words of affirmation may fade, especially in the busyness of life. Couples may stop saying "I love you" as often, or stop going out of their way to show appreciation. But sex remains one of the few moments where both people come back to each other fully, where distractions fall away, and the core of the relationship is re-energized. For a man, that consistency can be deeply reassuring. It tells him that even through stress, change, or conflict, the emotional bond is still intact. Sex also allows a man to show love in ways that are both emotional and physical. Through sex, he can be attentive, giving, present. He can show that he's not just there for his own needs, but for his partner's too. This generosity in the bedroom is often a mirror of the emotional investment he's willing to make in the relationship. He wants to please, to connect, to make his partner feel loved and seen. And when that effort is appreciated, it reinforces his sense of emotional value in the relationship. It tells him that the way he expresses love is working, and that his partner is receiving it in the way he hopes she will. There's also something incredibly healing about being able to love and be loved through physical closeness. For men who have a hard time opening up, sex can be a way to feel emotionally exposed without fear. It's a space where their guard is down, where they don't have to pretend or perform, and where they feel safe enough to simply be. In those moments, love is not spoken, it's felt, and that feeling often runs deeper than any words could reach. When sex is emotionally connected, it strengthens the bond between partners. It creates trust, restores closeness, and reassures both people that they're still on the same team. For men especially, this emotional reassurance carries over into other parts of life. He may feel more supported, more confident, more committed, not because of the act itself, but because of what the act meant. It reminded him that love still exists between them, not just in theory, but in touch, presence, and emotional closeness. In this way, sex becomes more than just a physical act. It becomes a ritual of emotional exchange. It's a way to show up for each other, to express what often goes unspoken, and to renew the connection that holds the relationship together. And for men who might struggle with expressing love in conventional ways, it becomes one of the purest, most heartfelt ways to say, "I love you." When a man is rejected sexually, it often reaches far deeper than just the moment. While it may appear as a simple "not now" or "I'm not in the mood," the emotional impact can be profound. For many men, sex is not just about pleasure. It's about connection, validation, and emotional closeness. When that connection is denied, especially repeatedly or without explanation, it can feel like a rejection of him, not just of sex. It touches on identity, self-worth, and the deep-seated need to feel wanted by the person he cares about most. Men are often raised with the expectation that they should initiate intimacy, take the lead, and be ready whenever the opportunity arises. That conditioning can create a lot of pressure, but it also wires them to associate desire with their role in the relationship. So when a man reaches out sexually, he's not just expressing physical desire, he's often making himself emotionally vulnerable. It's a moment where he's risking rejection to feel close, to feel affirmed, to feel chosen. When that gesture is met with indifference or dismissal, it doesn't just stop a moment of intimacy, it can leave him feeling unappreciated, unwanted, and emotionally exposed. For some men, being turned down sexually is one of the few experiences that deeply shakes their confidence. It doesn't mean a partner has to say yes every time. Healthy relationships include mutual respect for each person's boundaries. But the way rejection is delivered matters greatly. A cold, habitual, or dismissive no can build emotional distance over time. It can create a silent story in a man's mind that he's not attractive anymore, not good enough, or no longer valued in the way he once was. This story rarely gets voiced, but it lingers, influencing how he shows up in the relationship, how safe he feels, and how emotionally close he dares to be. In the early stages of a relationship, sex often flows freely. There's novelty, excitement, and a strong desire to impress and connect. But as time passes, life gets busier and responsibilities pile up. Intimacy can start to fade. That fading doesn't just affect physical satisfaction, it affects emotional connection. And if a man feels like the person he loves no longer desires him, he may not say it, but he feels it. Every unreciprocated advance becomes a message. You don't excite her anymore, you're not enough. It's not always logical, but emotions rarely are. What makes it more complex is that many men don't feel comfortable talking about how hurt they feel by sexual rejection. To admit that it hurts is to risk being seen as weak, needy, or overly sensitive. Labels men are often taught to avoid, so instead they internalize it. They pull back emotionally. They stop initiating. They detach, not because they don't care, but because it's painful to keep putting themselves in a position where they feel unwanted. Over time, that creates emotional distance, miscommunication, and resentment. The relationship becomes colder, not because of a lack of love, but because the emotional feedback loop has broken down. On the other side, women often don't realize the weight of these rejections. They may see sex as one part of the relationship, not the indicator of connection that men often feel it to be. If a woman is overwhelmed, tired, or emotionally drained, she might turn down sex without meaning anything hurtful by it. But for her partner, that refusal might hit much harder than she realizes. It might signal a disconnection that he doesn't know how to fix, one that he doesn't have the words to talk about, but feels deeply every time he reaches out and is met with silence. That's why communication is so vital. When sex is off the table, explaining why, offering reassurance, or showing love in other ways can soften the impact. A man doesn't need constant sexual validation to feel secure, but he does need to feel seen, wanted, and valued. If sex isn't possible in the moment, emotional closeness still can be. A gentle touch, a kind word, or simply acknowledging his desire with empathy can make all the difference. It turns a rejection from something that stings into something that strengthens trust. At the core, most men just want to feel chosen. They want to know they still matter to the person they love. And because many men express that need through sexual connection, being turned away, especially repeatedly or without emotional context, can begin to wear down their sense of value in the relationship. It's not about needing constant sex. It's about needing to feel that they are still enough, still desired, and still deeply connected to the one person they've allowed themselves to be vulnerable with. Sex is often thought of as a response to lust, a burst of physical desire or attraction that needs release. And while that's certainly one side of it, there's a deeper, more emotional reason men seek sex that is far less understood: reassurance. For many men, sex is not just about excitement or fantasy. It's about comfort, emotional safety, and the quiet need to feel accepted. When a man reaches for intimacy, especially during moments of stress, failure, or insecurity, he may not be trying to escape reality, he may be trying to reconnect with something grounding. In a world where men are expected to hold everything together, to be strong, composed, and in control, there are very few spaces where they can let their guard down. Emotional vulnerability isn't something many men are encouraged to show, and often they don't have the tools or language to express what's really going on inside. But through physical intimacy, they find a way to feel emotionally soothed. It's not about lust in those moments. It's about feeling held, wanted, and safe. It's their way of saying, I'm struggling, but I need to know you're still here. I need to feel that I still matter. After a tough day, a personal failure, or an emotional blow, many men won't sit down and talk through their feelings. They might not even consciously register what's weighing them down. But they'll reach for physical closeness, not out of hunger for sex, but because they're craving a sense of being understood and accepted without having to explain themselves. In that closeness, in that intimacy, there's a wordless message being exchanged. You're still good enough. You're still loved. That message is what soothes the inner tension they haven't shared aloud. This is why sex can sometimes follow difficult emotional events, not as a distraction, but as a form of reconnection. It's less about the physical and more about restoring a sense of stability. For many men, sex is one of the few places where they feel emotionally safe enough to truly be themselves, flawed, uncertain, even scared. And when their partner meets them in that space with love, patience, and presence, it gives them a sense of reassurance that words might not be able to reach. What often gets misinterpreted is the frequency with which a man might seek sex during emotional lows. To a partner, it might seem like he's ignoring real issues or trying to avoid talking. But in reality, he may be reaching for the only kind of expression he feels safe enough to make. It's not avoidance, it's his way of seeking closeness. And when that need is misunderstood, brushed off, or rejected without awareness of what's behind it, it can deepen his emotional isolation. Not because he's been turned down physically, but because the attempt to reconnect was misread. That's why empathy plays such an important role in intimacy. A partner doesn't have to say yes to sex every time to make her partner feel loved. But acknowledging the intention behind the gesture, especially when it's emotional rather than purely physical, can be incredibly healing. A simple moment of recognition, a touch, or loving reassurance that he's not alone in whatever he's feeling can do more than just soothe. It can strengthen the emotional foundation of the relationship. There's also a deeper level to this. When a man offers intimacy in this context, it's often a silent request for support. He may not know how to say, I'm feeling lost, or I'm doubting myself. But through the act of physical connection, he's asking, do you still see me? Am I still enough for you? And when that reassurance is given, not just through sex, but through presence, affection, and kindness, It rebuilds him. It gives him the strength to keep going, to keep trying, and to keep loving fully. This doesn't mean every sexual interaction is driven by a hidden emotional struggle. Men do seek sex out of attraction, desire, and playfulness too. But there are many moments when it's driven by something quieter and more tender. In those moments, sex becomes a language, a way to feel accepted, to feel close, and to feel like the weight they're carrying is no longer just theirs alone. Understanding this changes the narrative. It invites compassion into the bedroom. It reminds both partners that intimacy is not just about passion, it's about connection. And that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do for someone we love isn't just to meet their physical desire, but to understand the emotional need behind it. Because when sex becomes a source of reassurance, it becomes one of the most meaningful ways we can say, "I'm here, I see you, you're not alone." For some men, emotional intimacy begins not with long conversations or vulnerable confessions, but through physical closeness. While it's commonly assumed that emotional connection must come first, and that physical intimacy follows, that's not always how it works, especially for men. In fact, for many, it's the physical connection that creates the emotional bridge. Through touch, through closeness, through shared physical moments, a deeper emotional bond is gradually built, often in ways that words alone can't achieve. Men are not always taught to be emotionally expressive. From a young age, many grow up being told to toughen up, stop crying, or be a man. This conditioning doesn't erase their emotions, it simply teaches them to hide, suppress, or redirect them. Over time, this becomes a pattern. Emotional vulnerability begins to feel unsafe or unnatural. So, instead of learning to express what they feel through language, many men turn to actions, especially physical ones, as their primary form of connection. In relationships, this often plays out as a preference for physical intimacy as a way to feel emotionally close. When a man makes a move toward physical connection, he may not just be expressing desire. He may be seeking reassurance, trust, and closeness. It's in the comfort of physical intimacy that he begins to feel safe enough to open up emotionally. His body speaks the words he doesn't know how to say. "I want to feel close to you. I need to feel safe with you." Or, "I care about you more than I know how to express." For many women, this can seem backwards. Emotional intimacy is typically the foundation upon which physical connection is built. They want to feel emotionally understood and valued before opening up physically. But for some men, it's through the act of physical closeness, through sex, through touch, through presence, that they begin to trust, to soften, and to connect on a deeper emotional level. The more emotionally safe they feel in physical intimacy, the more they're able to access their emotional vulnerability elsewhere in the relationship. This isn't about choosing sex over emotional connection, it's about using sex as a way to get there. A man might not say, "I'm feeling distant," or "I need you emotionally," but he might initiate closeness in a moment of silence, stress, or uncertainty. That reach isn't always about lust. It's often about seeking emotional alignment. In his world, physical connection becomes the gateway to emotional connection. And when that reach is met with warmth, acceptance, and openness, it builds something real, an emotional bond that feels solid and secure. That's why rejection of physical intimacy can be so painful, not just because of the physical denial, but because of what it represents emotionally. If he's reaching out for closeness and is met with disinterest or withdrawal, it can feel like emotional rejection, even if that wasn't the intent. Over time, this can lead him to feel emotionally isolated, unsure of his place in the relationship, and less likely to express himself vulnerably in other ways. It's not about entitlement to sex, it's about the emotional connection he's trying to maintain or repair through physical presence. On the flip side, when physical intimacy is mutually respected, valued, and nurtured, it becomes one of the most powerful tools for emotional bonding. In those private moments where the world fades and two people are fully present with each other, layers of emotional armor begin to fall away. For the man who struggles to put his feelings into words, this is where he's most likely to show them instead. Through gentleness, through giving, through attentiveness, he expresses love, trust, gratitude, and even fear. And when his partner responds with the same depth and presence, he begins to feel emotionally seen, not just physically desired. This is why consistent physical intimacy in a relationship, when rooted in love and mutual respect, can do more than keep passion alive. It becomes an emotional tether. It reminds both people that they're still connected, still chosen, still emotionally safe with each other. And for the man who builds emotional closeness through physical connection, it becomes a way to continuously fall back into love, even when words fall short. Understanding that not all men access emotional intimacy the same way is key to deeper connection. When physical intimacy is seen not just as a desire to be fulfilled, but as a language of emotional expression, everything changes. The bedroom becomes a space of emotional truth, not just physical release. And in those shared moments of vulnerability, trust is built, walls are lowered, and real emotional intimacy begins to grow. A healthy sexual connection isn't just about passion or physical satisfaction. It's one of the foundational pillars of a thriving relationship. While love, communication, trust, and shared values are essential, the physical bond between two people is often what keeps the relationship feeling alive, intimate, and emotionally safe. When the sexual connection is strong, it fuels everything else. It reinforces affection, deepens emotional closeness, and creates a kind of unspoken reassurance that both partners are still actively choosing each other. It's not just about the act itself, but about what that act represents: desire, commitment, presence, and mutual care. Sex is often the most intimate and vulnerable form of connection in a romantic relationship. In those moments, people are physically exposed, emotionally open, and completely present with each other. It's a space where both partners can express love not just in words, but in action, in the way they touch, respond, and give. For many, this becomes a safe place to communicate feelings that are hard to articulate elsewhere. And when that space is nurtured and valued, it creates a deep level of trust and emotional safety that extends far beyond the bedroom. When a couple maintains a healthy sexual connection, they're continuously reinforcing their bond in a way that words and routine gestures sometimes can't match. It's a living reminder that the spark is still there, that they still see each other as lovers, not just as co-parents, roommates, or business partners. This matters, especially in long-term relationships where life's pressures, work, stress, parenting, responsibilities can start to overshadow the romantic side of the connection. Sex becomes a way to reset, to come back to each other, and to remind themselves why they fell in love in the first place. But when sexual connection begins to fade, the impact often shows up in other areas. It can lead to more arguments, emotional disconnection, or a general sense that something is off in the relationship. What starts as a physical issue can quietly erode emotional closeness. Both partners may begin to feel unappreciated, undesired, or distant without fully understanding why. It's not about needing sex constantly. It's about the loss of something that once made them feel close, chosen, and safe. That loss can create a ripple effect that impacts trust, affection, and even day-to-day communication. A healthy sexual relationship doesn't mean constant physical intimacy, nor does it mean always being in the mood. It means creating a space where both people feel safe, respected, and desired. It means being attuned to each other's needs, physical and emotional, and finding a rhythm that works for both. Sometimes this means having open conversations about desire, about mismatched libidos, about insecurities and emotional blocks. These conversations aren't always easy, but they're necessary, because when both partners feel heard and supported, they're more likely to meet each other halfway and reconnect from a place of understanding. Sex can also be a mirror for the state of the relationship. If intimacy is full of tension, avoidance, or obligation, it often reflects deeper, unresolved issues. But when it's marked by mutual care, playfulness, and emotional presence, it reflects a strong and balanced partnership. That's why prioritizing sexual connection isn't superficial. It's strategic. It keeps the emotional temperature of the relationship steady. It reminds each partner that they're still valued not just for what they do, but for who they are. In moments of stress, conflict, or life transitions, it's often physical intimacy that helps couples re-anchor their connection. It's a way of saying, we're still in this together. I still choose you. That kind of reassurance is incredibly powerful, especially when words are hard to find or when emotions are running high. The act of coming together physically becomes a form of emotional healing, a way to soften tension and rebuild closeness when life pulls people in different directions. Sex isn't everything in a relationship, but it is something that carries weight, meaning, and emotional depth. When nurtured with care and mutual respect, it creates a strong foundation for the relationship to grow. It supports communication, enhances trust, and reminds both partners that their connection is still alive and worth prioritizing. That's why a healthy sexual connection isn't just a bonus. It's a cornerstone of a deeply connected and lasting relationship. In the end, sex, when truly understood, is far more than just a physical act for men. It's a complex emotional language through which they express love, seek connection, build confidence, and find reassurance. It's how some men feel desired, how they access vulnerability, and how they experience emotional safety in a world that often denies them softness. A healthy sexual connection isn't about frequency or performance. It's about presence, emotional meaning, and mutual understanding. When nurtured with care, it becomes a powerful foundation for trust, closeness, and lasting intimacy, one that strengthens not only the relationship, but the man himself.